Good evening, Mayor and City Council. It is March 28th, 5:30, and this is our regularly scheduled briefing. We have 3 items on the agenda tonight for City Manager. The first of which is a discussion of the city logo and the branding standards. We have both Heather Ireland, Director of Planning and Development, and Jacob Board, Communications Manager, on the line for this discussion. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather. I believe you're going to kick us off.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Karen. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I hope everybody had a great weekend. It was absolutely gorgeous outside, and I was happy the rain was gone. I can't remember if it was a briefing or a regular council meeting that it was discussed that y'all wanted some more information about the branding efforts that were done by Dix Height and Partners. So worked with Jacob and Taylor, our CRA coordinator, to really dig into some old agendas and minutes. We watched a lot of meetings to really get the history. So I'm going to give you guys a brief history of the branding effort, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jacob, who's going to show you guys the branding as it's being used currently. And then obviously any questions you guys have, we'll answer. So this really all started way back in 2016 when the city selected Dix Height and Partners to do the Downtown Master Action Implementation and Management Plan. So the branding effort really started there. There were several meetings where the branding, the lifeguard chair logo in particular, was shown to both council and the CRA. So that actual logo that we're using now has been around since 2016. I don't even believe it's gone through a whole lot of change since it was originally shown at a public meeting back in 2016 when the project kicked off. Again, it was part of the downtown project originally, and it was presented to council and the CRA at a variety of meetings, mostly during 2017. And the general consensus was that the logo was acceptable to all. And at one point, council asked the CRA to get Dix Height to basically come up with some alternative logos or an alternative logo, which they did. And all that is in the brand standards manual that we sent to you guys a couple of weeks ago. And we can get into more detail on that if you want. So the brand standards guidelines were really designed to help the city present the logo and the brand for the city. And it includes a lot of different elements, such as, where and how to use the actual branding, because it's not just the logo, it's the actual color scheme and the font and all that stuff. That's definitely more of Jacob's bailiwick than mine, but wanted to make sure y'all understood what that document is actually utilized for. And again, Jacob will get into the details on how it's being used. So one of the things we did was we went back and looked at actually what the cost was to come up with the branding for the city. Again, it's our understanding that it was originally done under the downtown implementation plan, and at some point kind of became adopted by the entire city. And as you know, it's on our water towers and everybody's hats and shirts and logos on the website and everything like that. So one of the recommendations from finance was that the CRA actually be reimbursed for that cost, since it has been adopted by the whole city and has been being used not just in the CRA, but for the whole city. And something that staff is looking for direction on is, if the city is going to move forward to continue to utilize it, for the CRA to be able to use that brand standards manual, because there are some submarks and alternative logos, to come up with something that would be unique to the CRA for publications and outreach and marketing, because they're kind of still left without that identifying mark. And we have the opportunity to use these standards, to use one that's already in here or edit it in some way with the color schemes that are available to get something unique and specific to the CRA. So I can answer questions at this point, or I can turn it over to Jacob to show you guys how the logo and the brand standards are being used in practice. And he's got a slideshow for you guys.
Okay. I will just share my screen. I don't see any hands up. The good news is I don't think most of how we're using this branding is news to any of the council. Y'all are very involved in sharing everything that we do on social media and our newsletters and things like that. But I do want to say that when I started, it's a little over 2 years ago now, I remember interviewing and saying, I'm sure y'all have a really great brand standards book. And I remember on the interview, Mike was like, nope, we don't. And then I don't remember exactly when it was, but somehow this 120-page document came into my hands, and I was like, oh, there's an incredible set of brand standards that we can go by. And that's really what has guided my biggest project so far is the website, which I know all of you all have looked at and shared, and I think we're all pretty proud of as a city. But I found this quote about branding I wanted to share because I think it really ties in with what we've been doing. It's the process of connecting good strategy with good creativity. And since we're in the beginning stages of our strategic plan, I think it's just important to remember that a really good brand ties all of that together. And even though, we're not like a for-profit business trying to make billions of dollars, our brand is still really important to us. So this is just a couple things about how we've been using the logo and the colors that you'll find in that brand manual. The website was really, Civic Plus used that manual to build the website. So these are all colors that are detailed in the manual down to the exact numbers. Some of the fonts might vary a little bit just depending on what's most available and widely used, but most people might not be able to tell the difference in those fonts. And you'll notice this has been a hot topic lately around City Hall, that papyrus is not being used anywhere. And you can see the branding in our newsletter that people get. I know most of you get it and share that. And then just using that branding on our social media. The company that's been doing our urban trails used our logo really well. And I just think how most people are viewing social media it looks like a nice, clean brand that, people can go to. And I think, as far as first impressions go, and then if people start following us, I think it looks like we're a pretty active city and we're communicating with our citizens, and that logo and those colors really help us do so effectively. And these are just some of our posts that we've shared. I think the logo works really well with a lot of different things that we do on social media and in our newsletter and website and everything like that. I thought I had included when we created documents for hiring the information systems director and the city attorney. I wish I had included a screenshot of it, but we used the city standards and logo. And in my opinion, at least, it attracted high quality candidates for that role. And they all abide by the standards in that manual. I know it's 120 pages or 126 or whatever, but I think those rules actually give a lot of freedom and, just help me create and put out recognizable information that people will know is from the city. Any questions or where do we go from here?
I have a question. How long do we anticipate in sticking with this particular brand? Is it something that is it time to come back around? Is the chair what we're going to go with long term? Just want to kind of see where we're at, or if the council feels like we made that decision, or if that decision was made prior to any of us being on here.
I think we're leaning on your direction, on council's direction, and Heather or Karen can correct me if I'm wrong. I know that like when we were building the website, we did know that it wasn't officially adopted, but we also knew that we didn't want to wait a year or two or whatever, especially since it was during COVID, to launch a a campaign or a project for new brand standards before we did the website, and we really desperately needed a new website. So that's why we relied on those standards.
Okay, I'd be open to looking at options.
I'm not sure who is next. Councilor Dumont.
I'm showing Mayor Hoffman and then Councilor Dumont.
Counselor Dumont was next.
My bad.
It's okay.
Thanks. Kind of agree with Corey. I spent the day listening to 2015 to the January briefing in 2018 on all of the logos. And so that question was, did the council ever vote on this logo? It was a majority head nod at the briefing on June 4th. It wasn't unanimous by far, but it was a head nod that, yeah, maybe we should do that. But I didn't get the feeling that council members thought that that was the decision, that we were going with this, and that was it. Phil wasn't in the room. Charlie came late. That said, I want to circle back to Heather's note when Ashley looked at this, that $21,300 has to come out of the general fund to reimburse the CRA. So one way that we may be able to balance this out is give this to the CRA. This is the CRA's piece, and we'll do something similar that connects with it for the city as a whole. In 2015, I made my case that I did not like the logo, and Dix Height went back with that, and they just spelled out beach instead of the BCH, which was the way back to the original logo. And I still don't think that this represents the city of Jack's Beach. If you look at it, it's Jack's Beach. You could just put apostrophe S at the end of Jack's, and so we're just Jacksonville's beaches. We're not really our own identity. Even something as simple as making the lettering the same size on beach as Jack's would help to solve that. But I'm okay with the lifeguard chair. I think we could use it better. But I think we could use this, give this to the CRA. This is yours. Build off of it for the city. Thank you.
Mayor Hoffman?
So I don't remember where I was on the head nodding at that particular meeting. But as you guys all know, I was uncomfortable with the process in general. However, I've grown to really like this logo, and having seen the brand standards, there's several more options that I didn't fully appreciate, such as the round mark and then the long logo. So there's a lot more than just the stacked logo. I do agree it's a little off sizing, but that doesn't bother me enough to start over again on it. So having seen the brand standards and the colors, and I do want to issue a public apology to Mr. Stokes for making fun of his shirt, because a fully red logo is allowable in our brand standards. So I am sorry. But the brand standards are only as good as if you actually use them. And so I think that if we do go forward with this logo, that we do need to somehow, I don't know if we should formally adopt it, but really actually stick with it. There's so much ahead of us that we still need to do. We've gotten through some really big projects. A logo and a rebranding would come after strategic planning, or as part of strategic planning, in my opinion. So we did do it a little bit backwards. Again, we thought this was downtown branding. It turned out to be used everywhere but downtown. But I do think that this logo fits within our strategic plan and our mission, our new mission and vision. So I'm fine continuing with this logo, but putting it back in circulation once we get through the LDC, the comprehensive plan, some of these other big projects, and really doing it correctly, which would be to interview key stakeholders and have some focus groups and some legitimate, use the company that did this branding is a very good company, very well regarded, but use the full planning of a rebranding. But I think we have bigger fish to fry at this point. It's already on our water towers. It's already on our wardrobes. I would like to just stick with it for now and just know that we can put it back in circulation in coming years. This doesn't say downtown to me at all. So I don't know how we would just use this for just downtown, especially when it's prominently placed on water towers that aren't downtown. So my opinion is we stick with it. It may not be perfect, but compared to where we were when this discussion was originally happening, everything that Jacob just showed you is so much better looking, so much more professional, so much cleaner than what we had at that time. So I think we've made tremendous forward progress, and I think that this is a look that we should move forward with. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Meza, followed by Councillor Stokes.
I love the logo. I do agree with Demont. Maybe we could make the beach a little bit better or bigger. I know it says Jack's Beach and we want to be our own identity. And Mayor Hoffman has said that before, even in 2012 when we ran against each other. She even talked about having our own identity. And I think we've come a long way since then. We finally have our own hashtag, and I think we're going in the right direction. With the logo, it's already being used throughout the city, and I know some of the souvenir shops are already using it. I think Mayor Hoffman brought up good points where we have bigger fish to fry, and this could, we could deal with this a little bit later. But I like the colors. It's very lively. It's very happy, and I think it's going hand in hand with what we're trying to do here at the beaches. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Councillor Stokes.
Thanks. And Chris, I almost wore that shirt tonight, so that would have been really fitting. I can't believe I didn't. I'm really torn. A lot of great points this evening. I think 6 years in, it's been kind of adopted by the city. I don't know. My thought is should we look at a formal adoption of the brand for the city since it was done by the CRA, and now, and I apologize for the baby in the background, but since it was done by the CRA and then kind of, I don't know, just got somehow handed over to the whole city, that maybe we do need to look at a formal adoption process just so that it actually is on the books and done correctly. I just wanted to pipe in that I do really like the municipal logo. I think it's a fresh take on combining some old and some new. I think that's a great opportunity in your council direction, using alternate logos for other aspects of the city branding efforts. I think that's a great one. And I do like the surfboard alternate surf logo. I wish we could get rid of the relax in Jack's Beach wording maybe on there. That's a little cliche. I don't know. Maybe that's the wrong word, but it's just, maybe we put the beach life and incorporate the vision statement a little bit into it. Maybe that gets incorporated into this branding instead of relax in Jack's Beach. Maybe it's Jack's Beach, embrace the beach life, something along those lines. But it was a good history lesson tonight on how this came about. And thank you, Heather and Jacob, for providing that. And I think now is a great time to move forward and then get something distinct for the CRA so that they can have their own identifier. A lot of CRAs that I look at online do have their own kind of identifier within the city. So maybe that's a good opportunity to say, hey guys, thanks for the logo, but you're on your own now. Just kidding. We'll help you. So, all right, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen.
I'll be quick. I've kind of got a hybrid of opinions. I do agree with Georgette about the font size on beach. Maybe make it bigger or the same color as the pink or magenta or red or whatever we call it. I also agree with the mayor. I think that we have bigger fish to fry right now. And to take Sandy's words from the last meeting that we had, that the animals have already left the barn, so to speak, and it goes just beyond the water tower and our shirts and our logos. There's mailboxes that have the lifeguard symbol on it, and I've paid attention to that since the last meeting. There's a lot of them out there if you drive around and look. So I think that we've got a solid foundation to build upon. It's not saying that we can't do something with it later, but I like where we're at right now.
Thank you. And Councilor Golding.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be brief as well. I agree with Dr. Dumont as well. I think that again, when I first saw this back in 2016, when it first came up and it was discussed in the briefing, yeah, I was there and I agree. I didn't feel like that was a decision point where it was decided that the logo would be used. And when I saw it, I felt like it focused too much on Jack's, just like what Dr. Dumont said. That being said, though, as everybody has said, yeah, the horse is out of the barn. This has, been in place now for 6 years. I still would like to see, I'd like to see us do something that's, that we can all feel good about, that does fall in line with our strategic plan, that does incorporate embrace the beach life. If there's something that we can do with this in the interim until we can do a full-fledged rebranding like we should be doing, I agree with the mayor. We really should have gone through the proper process in doing the rebranding. Unfortunately, we got the cart before the horse, and so, I mean, I would just like to see us, I'd like to see us do something at some point. I agree, it may not need to be right now, but still, at this point, I would like to see us incorporate what we've done with strategic planning a little bit, just to tie it in with what we with this current logo.
Thank you. And Mayor Hoffman?
I just wanted to say real quick as a revisit, I have one of those chairs that you're talking about, Dan, but mine is actually a tennis judge's chair, not a lifeguard chair, just to clarify. This is a very good example of a place where we could be using that round mark. This is just a box. I mean, this is on our letterhead. I don't know why just a plain green box is on anything. So I think there's a lot more places that we can use this current artwork. And then I agree with whoever said, I would like to see us formally adopt this maybe when we do, if we need to approve that budget transfer. But if anything, I would support just making the beach part of the words bigger. I wouldn't change the color because I think the contrasting colors is important in making everything stand out.
And Councilor Meza.
Yes, Jacob brought up a good point about branding. Obviously, we're not a for-profit corporation. Like if you take a look at Nike, if you see the swoosh, that brand is recognizable across the world. Now, this is our opportunity as a city to shine bright like a diamond. Quoting a R&B singer, forgot her name. Either way, I think he has a good point about the branding, and it's I think once if you decide to adopt it or move forward in the future and change the brand of logo, that we pick something that's going to be known around the world, and eventually make it to Beaches Museum as part of a historic piece. That's it.
Thank you. And Heather, do you have your hand raised?
Yes, ma'am. If I could just add real quickly, so that the original effort for this with Dix Height and Partners, it was actually done by a company called Remixed. This was presented to the public as part of that first public hearing where the whole red dot, green dot exercise, they showed pictures of all kinds of things. And this was one of them that they presented to the public, and it was very, very well received. As far as editing it, I would defer to Jacob on answering any of those questions, but just like it was mentioned that was on Councilman Stokes' shirt using the all red, there are a lot of alternate uses for this depending on the background and where you're putting it. Whether it's a picture, dark background, light background. So, from our perspective, it does have a lot of versatility. And I don't know that we've explored all of those options yet. I mean, the website looks absolutely incredible to me personally. But just wanted to, make sure you guys knew that it did go through, at least in the very beginning, a process where it was looked at by the public during the Dix Height project that was done in the very beginning.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. If I can just recap, I think what I'm hearing, at least from the majority of the council members, is a general consensus to keep what we have for now, but perhaps bring it back to council for formal adoption as a city logo. I'm also hearing that you all would like to see us suggest ways that we might be able to adapt that logo or spin off of that logo and use some of those other alternate designs that are in the branding standards manual. And also, I think what I'm understanding is that maybe we should be reaching out to the CRA to see if we can adapt that logo somehow to be more specific to downtown, or use the same branding standards to develop something unique for the downtown area. Have I summarized your general consensus? Okay, I think that gives us enough direction, at least for us to get to work on some ideas to bring back to you all. And then we'll start preparing for a future council meeting to put the item on the agenda for formal adoption. Is there any other follow-up or revisit? Okay. The next item on the agenda is a status update on pier operations. In your council packets, we gave you a memo which briefly recaps the discussion that we had with council on the February 14th briefing, and then again on the February 28th briefing concerning the potential for City of Jacksonville Beach to take over the operations of the pier. On that February 14th meeting, we discussed 3 different options that might allow us to enter into an agreement with Jacksonville to take over the pier. You all gave us some direction to reach out to Jacksonville with those options and start the discussion, which we did. And then we discussed to follow up on February 28th. Jacksonville was only interested in 2 out of those 3 options, and only with the understanding that the City of Jacksonville Beach would be willing to enter into a 10-year agreement for a fixed price of $66,000 a year. We have since taken your direction and gone back, reached back out to Jacksonville for 2 things. One, to talk with them about the potential for an interlocal agreement. And we've asked them to provide us with a sample or a rough draft of an interlocal agreement so we can see what that might look like. We've also reached out to Jacksonville and their finance department for some statistics so that we can get a better idea of what the pier usage might be, so that we can determine what our cost might be were we to take it over. To date, we have not received a response from Jacksonville on either of those 2 items, and we followed up as late this afternoon just to make sure that we didn't have anything new to report to you. So what I'm really telling you tonight is we really don't have a lot of new information. We have provided you all with a timeline. It's a rough estimate at this point, but assuming that Jacksonville is willing to start the process of developing an interlocal agreement, we expect that alone would take as much as 3 to 6 months. And then after that interlocal agreement is secured with the terms clearly defined, then we would begin the RFP process. And from start to finish, the RFP process generally takes 2 to 4 months. So the earliest we believe that we could be looking at having a vendor in place would be 6 months. I think 6 months is extremely optimistic. More likely 11 months, potentially even a year from now. And that's assuming we get started right away on that interlocal agreement. That's something that we would have to work out the terms and then bring it back to both councils for adoption before we could move forward with an RFP. So we do have Jason Fatides and Ashley Gossett on the line if you all have any questions, but at this point, we just don't have a whole lot of new information to share. I do see one hand, Councilor Nichols.
We reached out to Roy Diamond to push this initiative because I realize it's something that he wants terribly bad, and he can make this process go really quickly with the city. I think the interlocal agreement is not going to be shouldn't be that challenging based off of the contract we've had before. But I think we need to push it as hard as we can and get a couple of the get Roy and whoever else is a council member to get them moving on it, because this is going to be incredibly disappointing to the residents of Jacksonville Beach if we have them do an RFP and get somebody else out there and we end up in the situation we were before.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Golding.
I would just follow up on what Mr. Nichols said and say that what I'd like to see pushed is getting that information that we've requested, because I don't feel that we should move forward with any kind of RFP without us having a better understanding of what this would cost us and what we would be looking at. So at a minimum, I think we really need to get that information before we do anything.
Mayor Hoffman.
I think this was the briefing that I missed, but I listened to the discussion last time. And one of the questions that I had was, and again, we're not going to get the answer until we get the answers to all the other questions, but the 66,000, it was stated that was going to a maintenance budget, but certainly some of that is administrative. So I'd want to know how much are they actually dropping into a maintenance budget? And if we are taking over the administration, is that number flexible? So I didn't really feel like that had to be a hard and fast number. If this was, yes, we have to drop this much into maintenance each year, then that's one thing. But if it's not that full amount, then I think we should consider that a fluid number.
Councilor Demott.
Thank you. Agree with what Chris said and with what Sandy said, and to a point with what Corey's. And I yes, we should push this as much as possible, but we have to make sure that we have the information we need to make a smart decision on behalf of the citizens. We know what we want. We have to make sure that we can get it. One of my concerns is, what is it that Jacksonville is going to require be offered on the pier, and how are we going to accommodate that? So that falls back in with getting that information. And until we know that, we're kind of dead in the water. We can't make a smart decision. Thank you.
Councilor Nichols.
The only other thing, the 66,000, I guess, is the rent that they were charging. And that was the same rent they did from day one of the original pier opening. So I believe that was at least 10 years ago now, probably 15. And for another 10 years, so there'd be no escalation in cost during that time. They do have to, because this is a structure, they're required to do biannual inspections of it. And then I guess the other money would go into just typical maintenance. I'd be interested to find out if maintenance arises that we find, are we going to have access to those funds in order to do the necessary minor improvements on it? So, and then also, I believe that would probably go towards some level of insurance and stuff on the structure as well. So a couple different things it goes into, but just with my understanding that it's been set at that rate since the very beginning, seems like we might be getting a deal, but we definitely need to do the research to find out, where that money goes. And, I mean, like I said, we can charge more to a company that's coming in and doing it. But that is what they were getting paid.
And just to follow up, some of those items that Councilor Nichols just mentioned, including maintenance and insurance, all of those things would have to be defined in the interlocal agreement with Jacksonville, so that we understand going forward what our responsibilities are and what Jacksonville would be responsible for. I don't see any other hands raised. As soon as we have additional information, We will continue to reach out. Councilor Nichols, we will take that into account and reach out maybe to the council members in Jacksonville to see if we can speed the process along. As for the data and the statistics that we've asked for, we did, after reaching out to Jacksonville staff, we have now submitted a public records request for that information, and we're waiting for the results. So as soon as we have some additional information to report, we'll let you all know, and we'll move forward as we can. The next item on the agenda is the development agreement for the Boardwalk. And again, we have Heather Ireland, Planning and Development Director. Heather.
Thank you, Karen.
Mhm.
So this item is in regards to the Adventure Landing project, which I know everybody is well aware of. Staff has been working with the agents for Adventure Landing to just kind of figure out different bits and pieces of their project. One of the items that came up during, I believe it was one of the open houses with council and the Planning Commission and the public, was the desire to have some sort of publicly accessible boardwalk from the property, near the property, towards the property, around the wetlands that are just south of the existing Adventure Landing Park. So in some recent meetings with the applicant's agents, they have expressed an interest in amending the conservation easements that govern the property just to the south and southwest of the current Adventure Landing property, where they would like to eventually build a very large multifamily project. And they've been working with the Water Management District to figure out the details on amending those conservation easements to allow boardwalks and access by the public, which the conservation easements currently prohibit any access or construction whatsoever. One of the things that they approached staff about was the possibility of them paying for a portion of the boardwalk and the city paying for a portion of the boardwalk, specifically along the Shetter Avenue right-of-way. And I'm going to attempt to share my screen with you guys here to show you the map that the applicant shared with us. Can you guys see that? Okay, good. So what the applicant is proposing, this is obviously Adventure Landing, and they've got some alternates for a proposed boardwalk from their property kind of into the marsh. They've got kind of a straight line proposed path and a curved one that goes out along the edge of this uplands area here that would connect down here to this little green boardwalk. And what they're asking the city, if they're interested in, is this orange piece right here that essentially would go along the unopened Shetter Avenue right-of-way. And what the city's interest in actually participating financially in this portion of the project would be. So when we met with them, the city manager wanted us to bring this before council and gauge council's interest in working with the developer on a development agreement that would kind of map out how this was going to be done and who was going to be financially responsible for what component of this boardwalk. Again, it was something that was brought up at one of the meetings, that the developer is willing to do it. They're interested. It seemed to be popular with both council and the public and the Planning Commission, that this would be something that could benefit the community and be a good asset. It's pretty close to Cradle Creek, but not necessarily something that could tie into Cradle Creek. So it really would be a standalone recreational amenity for the community. And let's see if I can show this other screen here. Can you guys see the second map that I pulled up? Okay, good. I don't know how to use the share screen very well. So this is just a little more detailed view of what they're thinking it could potentially look like with one of these boardwalks being paid for by the developer. And then again, this orange one that would be along the unopened Shetter Avenue right-of-way, potentially being paid for by the city. So the estimated costs are around $300,000. And I say at least because there could be some wetlands mitigation involved, obviously permitting cost, a little bit of design work that might still have to take place, surveying, that sort of thing. So again, these are cost estimates provided by the developer. The maps were also developed by their agents and their partners. So at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Counselor Jansen.
Heather, I just got a quick question. I don't have the urban trails master plan right at hand. Does this tie into that at all? Or have you checked into that to see if there's a connection there?
I don't have it directly in front of me right now either, but I know it came up at the last meeting last week. In fact, Councilwoman Dumont brought it up that somehow Cheddar was left off of their map. And I think it was supposed to be part of their trails map. So I think ultimately, yes, the goal would be to connect it.
Counselor Dumont.
Thank you. Did the applicant note if they're willing to pay for half of what the city would be paying for or more? It's all within their project area, and we need something to, the residents in Jack's Beach need to know that they're not it's going to be hard enough to get the citizens in Jacksonville Beach to look at this in a positive light whatsoever, and paying for the whole boardwalk is not going to help. I think is the best way that I can phrase it.
I don't see any other hands raised. Is anyone? Counselor Golding and then Counselor Stokes.
Yeah, I have several questions. I won't say a lot, but you know, I would want to know more about this estimate that they've gotten. You know, is the amount, is that taking into account that this boardwalk would be constructed of natural wood, or would it be constructed with something that would be a longer lasting type material? Because if you look at Cradle Creek, the boardwalk at Cradle Creek is you know, suffering from the elements. And so I would have concerns about, because to me, 300,000, that makes me wonder if the estimate is for like a wooden boardwalk as opposed to, you know, what is the material that we're using on the new walkovers now, which would hopefully last a lot longer. You know, I too have concerns about, you know, contributing public dollars to something like this, and maintenance, because there's maintenance that we have to take into account. Again, you look at Cradle Creek, and you know, it's I don't know, it's been 10 years or so since any maintenance has been done, and it really looks, I mean, it needs it, and because it's exposed to the elements all the time. So, you know, we're not just looking at a one-time cost. This is something that could potentially be a long-term cost. And then I also have a question about, you know, the boardwalk that would be coming from the development and connecting to the Cheddar Avenue boardwalk, you know, that the developer would pay for. Is that something the developer would maintain in perpetuity? You know, because again, that's not, I would have concerns about the city having to pay for that maintenance over a long period of time as well. And lastly, I would just say that I feel like this is something that would warrant a workshop. And so we could get some public input on it, to see how does the public feel about something like this? Would the public be open to the city spending this kind of money on something like this? Thank you.
Counselor Stokes.
Thanks. I do really like the fact that we're now pursuing a development agreement. I think they're pretty important. Coming from my work on land development side, I think it's a good way to get some work between us and the applicant and come to semi-positive solution. Obviously, development isn't going to be happy for everybody, but do try to get something that will benefit us. Sorry, Sandy brought up the point of maintenance. I would like to know who's going to be in charge of that. And I would like to see if we can push back a little bit on some cost share. We're kind of like at a 50% right now. I think if we want to get this done, we need to be at like a 75-25 split at worst for the city. I think that is starting to get into a fairer thing for this. I was wondering if there could be like a possible loop back there, maybe like between 1 and 2, maybe alternate 1 and 2. Maybe there's like a little loop so that you could go and take a dog on a walk back there and enjoy this hopefully nice shaded area. That's something that I would be interested in, a possibility. And maybe at that point, that if they can do alternate 1 and alternate 2, maybe that works for us a little bit better. And then another one I looked at is there going to be like any sort of parking down here? There's not any parking over there in Cradle Creek. That doesn't have a lot of parking. It does have a little bit. We do want it to be accessible for the nearby Jardin de Mer apartments, but also, you know, it could be a great area. Like I said, going back to dog walking, the dog park's not too far from there. Could be a really nice little area. It doesn't need a ton of spots, but just a little something to where somebody from like us on the south end could pop up there, go for a little jaunt through the woods and head back. Thanks.
Counselor Dumont.
Thank you. First, Cradle Creek was redone, all the walkways last year or during the pandemic. So get out there, have fun. It's all solid wood, but it's wood. So we'll have to get redone again. So I like all the questions on the maintenance. I had a question on public access to their parts of the boardwalk. So I like what Chet's saying, like being able to walk his dog, but is the public going to be allowed on their property? Or is it only going to be in the public right-of-way that we would be helping to pay for that boardwalk piece? Because I thought that's why we'd pay for that, and the other parts are private, where the general public is not allowed to go on the red and blue lines.
I don't see any more hands up. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Or it sounds as if you all, you've given us a lot of questions that you would want to answer before we can proceed with any sort of an agreement. And I'm also hearing that you all would like, in general, for us to solicit more public input into the project, right? Okay. Heather, do we have enough direction for next steps?
Yes, ma'am, I think we do.
Okay. Okay, so we'll go back and sharpen our pencils and come back to you when we have some more information for a plan.
Can we also check on the connection with the urban trails as well?
Mm-hmm. Sure will. Okay. And those are all the agenda items that we had for tonight. There are no miscellaneous city manager items. So does anyone have any report on any committee assignments from council? And seeing none, are there any thoughts on future briefing topics? Other than those items that we've been talking about tonight, which we have to follow up on and bring you some more information. Okay.
We're going easy on you, Karen.
Hey, gotta love it. I'll be the one responsible for getting us out of here at 6:20. I'll take the credit for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for taking it easy on me and making it a short night, but we've got a lot of work to do. So we'll follow up on all of those items that we talked about tonight.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.